Raising teenagers is hard. Understatement of the century. This is Mentor Select. Mentor Select. Parenting teens to be successful adults. Mentor Select serves parents who are raising teens. Every week, Derek interviews leading experts that work with teens, educators, counselors, mentors, and authors to give you practical tips, strategies, and resources that you can incorporate immediately to better connect and understand your teen. All while parenting them to be successful adults, focusing on social and emotional development, something that's left out of the classroom, but not in ours. Be sure to subscribe, share, and rate. This is Mentor Select, and this is your host, Derek Phillips.
Welcome to episode 90 of the Mentor Select podcast. I hope that you and your family are remaining safe throughout these uncertain times. Know that I'm praying for you all safety. So parents, you are in for a great treat today. We have the owner of Mindful Endeavors, Monica Smith. How are you, Monica?
Great. I'm so happy to be here, Derek. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. Glad to have you. Where are you joining us from, Monica?
I am from Connecticut, northeastern Connecticut, in the woods.
In the woods? Pretty rural?
Yes.
All right. Nothing wrong with that. I love being out in nature. Yes, indeed. So, Monica, can you get kicked off and just tell us more about Mindful Endeavors?
Sure. Mindful Endeavors is a company that I created specifically because I believe in everyone's potential to develop their personal and professional best. And I teach a 360-degree wellness program utilizing the 5 R's of enterprise, which I created. So it's fantastic. I let everybody know to stress lightly, and practice makes progress.
I totally agree with that. Absolutely. It's the only way you're going to progress is practice. It doesn't happen through osmosis. Not at all. So prior to starting your company, Monica, what was your background?
Well, I've worked for over 25 years in the field of human services, really. I initially, my career was an interpreter for the deaf and hard of hearing, and I worked in a mainstream school system primarily in middle school and high school with kids who were mainstreamed into the public schools. And from there, I went into the field of child protective social work, which I've been doing for the last 14 years.
Wow. Okay.
Yes, indeed.
So are you still working in that field as well?
I am. I work in child protective services as a supervisor, and then I also am an entrepreneur with my own business, Mindful Endeavors.
Awesome.
And I am a licensed professional foster parent, and I foster teens primarily.
Wow, that's funny you mentioned that. I just watched a movie, and I can't remember what the name is right now, but they became foster parents. I think Mark Wahlberg was in it.
Yes. Instant Family.
Instant Family. Yeah. Oh man, I love that movie. It made me cry. And I just love, especially the insight where they're the scene where they're saying like the foster parents are more gravitating towards the young kids and pretty much ignoring the teens, avoiding them. So how did you get started into foster parenting, especially focusing on teens?
Well, in the field of child protective services, that's very true reality. A lot of times when people get into or decide to become a foster parent, they come into that with certain ideas and intentions, and they're really looking for younger kids. So we have a large population of teenagers that are in our system that don't have foster homes, they don't have stability, and they don't get that transition planning and support to exit into the adult world and be successful. So the statistics for teenagers who are exiting state care are pretty grim. And I wanted to walk the walk and talk the talk. So, my heart is in it for these kids, and I figured if I'm going to be a foster parent, I want to foster teens.
Wow. Yeah, heart has to absolutely be in it, definitely. So
It is not for the faint of heart.
how many teens have you fostered to date?
I have fostered approximately 5 teenagers.
Wow.
I've been a foster parent for the last 5 years. Generally, I've had the kids for about a year each. I get them as they're later in their teenage years, so
Okay.
I want to make sure that they're set up right.
Yeah.
They're set up for resources, that they're graduating high school, that
Right.
they're staying out of trouble, that they're not getting pregnant, that you know, that they have somebody who they know who's in their corner.
Absolutely. And yeah, those later years are just as important. It's critical. So absolutely. And it's for me, definitely people like yourself is hold a special place in my heart because when I was 11 years old, I had encounters with Child Protective Services. And fortunately, my uncle, who was my mother's older brother, he stepped up and became my legal guardian.
Oh, wonderful.
That was a lifesaver, but certainly made all the difference in the world. Yeah. Like I said, it's not for the faint of heart in the line of work you're in. Now, you mentioned about just the grim statistics about kids from exiting the foster care system and like them not having that support.
Mm-hmm.
Can you talk more about that support that really kids need to transition into adulthood successfully?
Yeah, there absolutely. There's a phrase or a statement that comes to mind, and I'm not sure who originally said this statement or made this quote, but when kids deserve love the least, that's when they need it the most.
Wow. I love
So I'm
that.
going to say that again. When kids deserve love the least, that's when they need it the most. And that's what I find with teenagers, right? They're at a typical time in their life where they're trying to figure out where they fit in the world. They're kind of stretching their muscles and building their muscles of autonomy and independence, and that looks like pushing back, right?
Right.
And if you think about parenting a teen is like think about riding a roller coaster, Derek.
I like
Right?
roller coasters. It can be scary though.
Oh, it's scary. No doubt about that. But think about what do you do when you get into a roller coaster? The first thing you do is you sit in that seat,
Right.
right? And you're not getting in it because you think something bad's going to happen. You're getting in it because you think it's going to be something good, right? It's going to be fun. But you get in that seat, and then the first thing you do is you put that brace down right around your neck, and you put it, and you hear it click, right? And then
Right.
what do? What's the first thing you do? You push on that, don't you?
Oh yeah, make sure it's locked in.
You
Yes.
do that. Why? Because
Right.
you want to make sure that when the time gets tough and the tough gets going, that
Mhm.
thing's going to hold you in. And
Right.
that's what's like parenting a teenager.
Mm.
A parent is like that safety bar. That parent is that safety bar. So what does a teenager do? They push against it. They jiggle it. They press it. They put you to your limit, right?
All right.
Because they want to know that when it gets scary and it gets tough, that you're going to be there to hold them there. You're going to be their safety net.
Wow. I like that analogy. Wow, that definitely makes a lot of sense. And
It's not fun for the safety bar.
not for the safety part. But yeah, the safety part has to hold strong. So what are some things that parents can do to prepare to just endure the hold strong during the why teens are pushing back and testing them?
Well, one of the things that I tell parents that I counsel or that I coach around those issues specifically is that you want to try to avoid getting into a power struggle. And that's so much easier said than done because our kids, they know exactly what to do and what to say to push our buttons,
Oh
right?
yeah, the masters.
So I have a strategy that I utilize is when my kids are testing the limits, and when they're getting sassy or when they're getting disrespectful or when they're really pushing the limits of my patience, I remind myself that they must need something. So I ask them, I identify their behavior. So I say, I notice that you seem to be having some difficulty communicating with me respectfully. What is it that you need from me today?
Wow. Okay.
And by asking them what they need, it's a whole different conversation than you telling them you're being disrespectful and don't you do that, and setting limits and boundaries, because the first thing they're going to do is they're going to go to that testing place. But when you're asking them what they need, that's a whole different conversation.
Right.
So that's one of the strategies that I tell people.
See how that can be a very just effective strategy, and it sort of catches them off guard. They're not expecting that.
Exactly. Mm-hmm. So another strategy that I tell people, and this is not just for parenting. This is practically applicable as a supervisor, working in teams, working with peers, in any facet of your life. But it's called practicing the power of the pause.
Okay.
So, Derek, what I say is the power of the pause is we tend, as human beings, and it's just the way that our brains are made and the way that we're made, to want to react. Right? And so if somebody comes into our space with energy, right? Negative energy or even positive energy, but we have a tendency, we're biologically designed to match that energy. We have something in our brains called mirror neurons, the same parts of our brain that when our children are babies and they're looking at, we're holding them and they're looking at us and we're smiling and they smile back at us, those same neurons are in place when they're teenagers and they come into our space and we're looking at them and they're having some negative energy. If we practice the power of the pause, it allows us time to respond instead of react. It also allows our kids a minute to reflect on something they just said or something they just did. So if they're not getting an immediate response from us, they're going to pause too. And you could then have a different outcome.
Wow. Getting some gems here already. Wow. So you're not new to this. You've been doing this for quite some time. You picked up some effective tools and tricks. Huh?
I'm a veteran.
Holy cow. Wow. I like that. And also going back to what you mentioned prior about basically identifying their behavior and then, okay, what do you need from me? It kind of de-escalates the situation instead of escalating.
Yes, absolutely.
But like I said, it's easier said than done, especially old school parents where it just has that dictator parenting style. In your experience, is that proven to be effective?
It's interesting because I have the experience of parenting my own biological child and then parenting children who are not biological. And what I can tell you is that regardless of whether they're biological children or not, a parent brings their emotion and their expectation to parenting. So what happens sometimes is when kids are teens or kids, they're not showing up the way that we taught them or that expect them to show up. We as parents, we feel like we are failed, or we feel that the kid's behavior is an extension of us. We might feel embarrassed. We might feel challenged. We might feel disrespected. There's a lot of big feelings for parents that go into that scenario.
Right.
And sometimes parents, especially old school parents, they have a hard time when kids get to be teenagers because kids are moving into a phase where they're, again, expressing their autonomy, and that piece of respect is tested. Right. So I try to tell parents, old school and new parents too, you have to let your kids be their own person. And at some point you've done your best, and the role as a parent, it changes. It changes when you get to have, when they start to get to be preteens, and especially when they get to be in full swing teenage time frame of their life. Our role as parents change. It changes from that protector, that, almost like that more authoritative figure.
Right.
It changes to more of like a coach and a mentor, right?
Right.
Because we are not going to force our children to do anything that they don't want to do.
Whether we like it or not.
When they're a teenager. And that's where a lot of friction comes in, right? That's where a lot of friction comes in with teenagers and parents. Because parents want their kid to be a certain way. They want their kid to go to a certain school. They have expectations of their child. They have expectations of their child's future. And when that child isn't living up to the parents' expectations, then that creates a lot of discord between the relationship.
Right. That's something I've certainly learned the hard way in terms of just people in general and relationships, is when you put expectations on people, you're setting yourself up to be disappointed. And also it's kind of like a covert contract, because the person you're setting those expectations on, they have no idea what your expectations of them really are. And they can't live up to that. And it's not their job to. That's something I've definitely learned the hard way. And by not placing expectations on people, it's been easier for me.
Yeah. And it's absolutely right, Derek. You're absolutely right. And it's difficult because we can't help but have expectations. So the piece there is communication, right?
Right.
The piece of that is communication. So our kids, especially our teens, they know when we're not happy with them. And they don't want to feel like their parents are disappointed in them. So having that room to have that space to have a conversation about, kind of what's going on. Why is it so important that my child go to a certain college? Isn't it just that I want my child to be successful? But there's a lot of times where that's a big bone of contention for older teens and their parents.
Yeah. They want to live their own life, not that their parents living their life through them.
Exactly.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think, part of it is parents have to also kind of check their ego. And like I say, as they get into those later teen years, preparing them to make that exit, that transition into adulthood, switching roles into being more of a coach and a mentor. Yeah, I like that a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Now, going back to the quote you had mentioned about when, when teens or kids in general seem like they deserve love the least, that's when they need it the most. What are some actions that parents can take in that time of friction and when they're rebelling, and how can they express the love that the teens need?
Parents can express their love for kids by being consistent. Their kids, it's not easy as a parent to know that your child is setting themselves up for a mistake. And what I have told my kids is, this is what I think. And then I give them some options. This is how this could shake out. This is how this could shake out. Have you talked to this person? I try to refrain from telling them to do something or telling them not to do something. I will tell them specifically that I don't support this, and this is why. This is not okay in my house, and this is why. This is what you need to do to respect the people in this household, and whatever my expectations are, whatever a parent's expectations are, that's okay. You don't have to agree with your child, and you don't have to change your expectations or your values as a parent because your child is expressing themselves and not following your values. They don't share, maybe not sharing or behaving as though they share your values. You don't have to change. You can be consistent. You can be loving as long as you're consistent. And they know that when they do make mistakes, because they will, that you're going to be there to help them through it.
Consistency. Yeah, absolutely. Now, I'm piggybacking on that. So what are some effective ways that parents can discipline their children in an effective, loving way? So when they do push those boundaries.
I'm going to go back to consistency on this one, Derek, because what I have found is parents, they try to use a punishment, like say, I'm going to take your phone, or I'm going to take your car, or
Right.
I'm going to turn off the Wi-Fi. They use that as leverage. And what happens is if a parent says something out of anger without thinking through the consequence that they're saying that they're going to deliver, right, then and they're not able to actually follow through with it. I'll give you
Right.
I'll give you a couple examples for teenagers.
Excellent.
You set the expectation, and if your teen doesn't rise to the occasion, and there's consequence because that's part of life, right?
Right.
And if I say I'm going to take your car away from you, and you're not going to have your car for a week, but my teenager has a part-time job. My teenager works three nights a week. And
Not practical.
right?
Yeah.
Mama gets home at 6:00, makes dinner, and I have to go now run out at 9:30 or 10:00 at night to pick up my teenager. That's not a punishment for my teenager. That's a punishment for me.
Right.
I'm in my pajamas by then. I'm not going to want to run out and be an Uber. But
Right.
you can be thoughtful about it. And one of the ways I've done that is I have said to my teens, I'm really upset. There is going to be a consequence for this. I need some time to think about what that's going to be. We'll talk tomorrow after dinner.
Okay.
But set a time to come back to the conversation. Not every conversation has to happen in the moment. Not every consequence has to be delivered in the moment. You can be thoughtful about it, and you can come back to it. But whatever consequence you give, you need to be consistent and you need to follow through. Because if your teen knows that there's wiggle room, then they're not going to listen to you, and they're going to know that what you say isn't necessarily what's always going to happen.
Right. Absolutely.
There's a balance between being consistent and then being too rigid.
Okay.
So I don't want to relay the sentiment that we need to be rigid, because I do think that sometimes we make decisions based on the information we have at the moment, right? And we do our best in that time. And then maybe a couple days later, we get new information that if we had that 2 days ago when we, levied that consequence, maybe that consequence would have been different. It's okay to let our kids know we've made a mistake. It's okay to let our kids know that we're going to renegotiate something, because our kids also need to see that we're human too.
Right. That transparency. Yeah, that's certainly a very complex question regarding discipline, but with your expertise, I felt comfortable asking you, and you gave certainly some great insight. And I think that should be very insightful for a lot of parents, especially for myself, where as a parent, they feel like, okay, you need to say have a conversation in the moment, or that whatever the discipline or consequence is going to be in the moment. But like you say, if you don't think it through and it's through anger, then it end up being more of a punishment for the parent.
And I'm only using that example because I have learned from experience.
That's the best experience. Yes, indeed. I'm sure a lot of parents can relate to that one. Now, I do want to talk as well. I know you worked in middle schools and high schools. I think a lot of times, due to maybe breakdown in communication, that parents have no idea what teens are facing in school environment. What are some of the challenges, issues, stressors that teens are facing at school?
Yeah, I think that that's a great question, and it's unfortunately it's something that I see a lot. Now this is my personal opinion,
Okay.
in my humble opinion, we need to collectively do better teaching our kids how to cope with stress and teaching our kids how to manage difficult situations in a healthy way. So we do a good job in a lot of things, but in that particular area, I think we could really do better. There's a lot of work that I do around stress reduction and basically self-compassion and self-care. And That's probably a whole nother interview.
Yeah, I'll definitely have to have you back.
But what I think the kids are facing is there's a lot of pressure. There's a
Right.
lot of pressure on kids to be involved in 8 million activities and, achieve a certain GPA and do a prescriptive format of 4 years of high school. And that's such a disservice to our kids. And it's really undue pressure because it takes them being an individual out of the equation, right? So there's also a piece of perceived stress and anxiety. So the teenagers, they perceive their world is all social, right? Their world, 100% of their world, they're in the middle of it, and then there's their friends, and then there's their family, right? And when they express their sense of overwhelm, they're often met by parents being like, "Oh yeah, you have it tough. You go to school all day,
Yeah.
and then you come
Downplaying it.
home,"
Yeah.
and they do it, and they don't feel validated. And if, as parents, we're not validating our kids when they're coming to us, because perception is reality, Derek.
That's one of my
Perception
favorite
is
quotes.
reality.
Perception is reality. Absolutely.
If they perceive that they're overwhelmed and they're struggling, and they bring that to us and they tell us that they're overwhelmed and struggling because they got a C instead of a B, or they're fighting with a friend, we need to really pay attention to that and validate that for them.
Right.
And it gives space to have a connection just by listening. I think parents really underestimate the power of just listening to our kids.
Yeah.
So they have a lot of stress and overwhelm. There's a lot that they're up against. Social media is fantastic. I love it. I use it. I have Instagram and Snapchat.
Yeah. Everything good can be used for evil.
Exactly. But there's a whole lot of bullying and intolerance. As open and accepting as a lot of spaces are, there's still a lot of intolerance and bullying. And I think that is something that touches all of the kids that I have worked with, whether
Yeah.
they're considered the popular kids or the jocks or the art
Right.
kids or the stoners. If they're still stoners, I don't know what they call them nowadays.
The vapors or something. I don't know either.
But you know what I mean.
Yeah.
But it's just our kids' perception of their stressors is their reality, and as parents, we need to make sure we're giving space to listen to our kids and validate them.
Certainly. Now, talked about self-management and as far as self-care and healthy ways to deal with stress. What are some unhealthy ways that you see teens dealing with stress?
Well, they're overly sexualized. They get into drugs and alcohol. And there's a piece of teenagers where they're not only expressing their autonomy and, where they're feeling with their thoughts and opinions and values, but it's what they're doing and what they're exposed to, who their friends are. That's unhealthy. When you have, they engage in unhealthy relationships. There's a big piece of like dating violence for teenagers.
Oh, wow.
I think is way under the radar, but
Right.
it's very prevalent. So girls and boys, Derek, it's not just.
Oh, wow. Okay.
It comes out in lots of different ways. It could come out as them experiencing mental health issues, for them not eating or eating too much, or just even in their hygiene, in their own practices of how they take care of themselves. So there's a lot of different ways that those unhealthy copings can present in their presentation that parents can be aware of.
And I know as far as it's going to depend on the response based on whatever the unhealthy coping mechanism is. But once parents do identify those unhealthy behaviors, what are some actions they can take to help their teens?
Well, I think that they should not give up on pursuing the conversation with their kids, right? Because the kids are going to resist it. They're going to resist it. But parents should definitely look for help. They should talk to the kid's pediatrician. In Connecticut, and I know in many states, there's something called an info line. So in Connecticut, it's 211, but there is an info line in most states for just to have parents have a resource to like bounce some information off of somebody who can connect them to resources in the community. If their kids are struggling with mental health, they can use their school counselors. In some cultures, mental health and counseling is not really well received.
Yeah, more taboo, stigma.
Yeah, it's more of a taboo, but I think that in this generation, they're more open to receiving support and services. So
Okay.
just reaching out to, like I said, school counselors, pediatrician. Another really interesting resource that I'll share that a lot of people don't think about as parents and caregivers is that there's a lot of companies that where you work that have something called an employee assistance program. And an employee assistance program is a program that's generally offered in the scope of your benefits at work, like through human resources. And it's usually a company that the company that you're working for contracts with, and they offer a host of different resources as well. So that could be something parents can look into.
Okay, fantastic. Now, I know another big challenge for parents, especially with teenagers, is, like I said, not having that open communication where maybe they feel like their teenagers are just not communicating no matter how hard they try. And I know in your line of work, especially being a foster parent, you've had to come up with some clever ways to break down those barriers. What are some good ways that parents can break down those barriers and open those lines of communication with their teens?
McDonald's.
Happy Meals.
I'm saying that jokingly, but honestly, if you get your kids in the car and you drive them somewhere, kids talk in the car. If you find out what they like to eat, when my kids are having a hard time, I'm like, they may not want to talk about it. And I know that they may not want to talk about it. I mean, you had a hard day. Yeah. What's going on? I don't want to talk about it. I'm like, okay. Do you need anything? No. You sure you don't need anything? Yes. I just want to go in my room. Okay. Do you want some McDonald's? Come on, chicken nuggets.
Yummy, yummy.
It's just it's not necessarily the food or fast food, and I'm not endorsing, junk food.
Right.
But it is, it's just an avenue to engage in a conversation that's something other than what's bothering the kids.
Yes.
And
Okay.
generally, if you start there, you start with something, innocuous, like something light, music, or, just spending time with them, just getting them in the car to take them for a ride, to get an ice cream cone or something. They may not even share with you what's wrong, but they're going to know that you care. And they're going to know that opportunity is that option to talk to you is open. And a lot of times, even if they don't open up, they'll come back to you later.
Okay.
They'll come back to you. They'll circle back. The best things that I did as a parent when my son was growing up, we would do date nights.
Okay.
And so every once in a while we'd have a date night. But I would, in the school year, on the first, every Friday, we would go to breakfast before school.
Okay. I like that.
And so we would just go to breakfast before school. So that was a thing for us. That was a tradition. So it doesn't have to be spending money, and it doesn't have to be going out somewhere. But if you set up a regular time with your kid where they know that on this day, once a week, this is our time together.
All right.
Sunday is family day. You can lock yourself in your room and play on your Nintendo Switch. But
6 days a week.
but on Sunday, we're going out and we're doing something. We're going on a hike. Where do you want to go? What does that look like? Where do you want to, do you have a preferred activity or whatever that looks like? And they might fight it a little bit or complain about it.
Right. They're looking forward to it.
They are going to look forward to it.
I love it. And it seems like with all of the advice you're giving, it still all comes back to consistency.
Consistency and stability, because the teenage years are a time of a lot of upheaval and a lot of inconsistency with their own personal feelings, maybe with their identity, inconsistency and instability in their friend relationships and their, emerging romantic relationships.
Right.
And if there's consistency in their home and with their primary caregivers, then they're going to do all right.
Yeah, because if you think about it, you want that roller coaster bar to be consistent, to consistently hold. Not sometimes it holds, and other times it don't.
Exactly.
Yes, indeed. Awesome. So if you have parents listening now and say, hey, I really like the idea, I've been considering becoming a foster parent. I actually have some friends who are considering it. What advice would you give them, and what are some things they can do to start preparing?
Oh, yeah. Well, I would definitely celebrate that idea. Definitely let them know that there is a lot of resources out there. Parents who are considering being foster parents, like I said, it's not for the faint of heart. It is rewarding and challenging, and you will learn as much from the kids as will learn from you.
Yeah.
Depending on what state you're in, you could go on to your state child welfare website. Um, every state, it's nationally, has a child welfare website. And generally on every site, there's an option for fostering and adoption.
Okay.
There's also different states do it differently. Some states have different organizations that lead their foster and adoptive resources. Outside of the state agencies, a good resource is Casey Family Services,
Okay.
and they're nationwide, Casey Family Services. But yeah, and there's tons and tons and tons of resources online. There's the good, the bad, and the ugly, right? So really, honestly, sometimes we're just doing our best to give kids a safe place to land on their
Right.
journey. And we may not be able to see the fruits of our labor, but we plant the seeds.
Exactly. Yeah.
And hopefully we'll change. We have the power as foster parents to change the trajectory of a child's life.
Yeah.
That's powerful.
That's powerful. And that, absolutely, like I said, my uncle being my legal guardian, that certainly changed the trajectory of my life. So I'm a living testimony. Indeed. Now, I'm sure you've had plenty of success stories through being a caseworker and also fostering. What are some of those core, I would say, life skills you see that kids who make that transition successfully to adulthood possess?
I would say one of the primary skills is really a mindset around their ability, right? Their belief in their self and their ability to succeed.
Okay.
And then we really need to do a good job teaching them how to honestly manage their money,
Okay.
how to avoid getting into debt, how to cook, how to shop,
Yeah.
how to cook, how to honestly, kids nowadays, how to make phone calls. I'm not even joking. How to have a conversation, because they all say it's so awkward talking on the phone, and I'm like, you need to use your words, guys.
Yeah, communication skills. Yes, indeed.
And just how to navigate situations, and most importantly, to have a list of resources of people to call when they need help.
Okay.
And I think that that's helpful too. They feel empowered in when they know that they're going to try something on their own, and if they need some help, but they get stuck, then who can they go back to help? And so, really, on the money thing is huge. A lot of our kids, I tell my kids all the time, if you can't manage your money when you're broke, you're not going to manage your money when you have money.
Yes, indeed. That's true.
$3, you're going to have a budget in this house. So, but that's an important life skill, because you think about one of the biggest, as adults, what's one of the top 5 stressors? Money.
Money. Yeah.
In marriages, what top 5 stressors?
Money. Yeah, money.
Right?
Yeah.
If we don't help our kids have a good relationship with money and a sound idea of how they're going to practice navigating that, then they're going to be in tough situations.
Right. True. Absolutely. I think that's a good pivot point to you telling us more about your company. We've been talking a lot about child protective services and fostering. Now let's talk a little more about Mindful Endeavors.
Oh, sure. Great. Yeah, Mindful Endeavors is a company that I created to help people cope with stress
Okay.
and recognize the importance of self-care. And I do personal and professional development coaching. What that looks like a lot of times is me going into organizations and businesses and working with their teams and groups around certain pain points like management, leadership, um, communication, team building, work-life balance. And I use a program called the 5 R's of Enterprise, which I talk about in my book. I just recently published and authored a book called Stress Lightly.
Congratulations.
Thank you. I'm so excited. Practicing the Art of Self-Care. That's on Amazon. It's got a couple pieces of information about me personally. It's practically applicable, and I go through all the 5 R's of Enterprise, which I've said that a couple times. I'll tell you what they are.
Okay.
It's regroup, recalibrate, reassure, reflect, and rest. Okay. And when we apply those 5 R's to each of the domains of our wellness, and I use a wellness wheel. It's got 8 domains, and which include financial, physical, emotional, intellectual, social. When we use that strategy to apply all of those tools to the different domains of our wellness, we can achieve balance and success with our goals, personal and professional. So that's what I do.
Fantastic. Wow. When do you have time to sleep?
I don't sleep. I actually sleep really well. Apparently I snore.
So you sleep hard when you sleep.
I'm all in. I just go 100% no matter what I'm doing.
Wow. That is awesome. Well, I really enjoy just interviewing people like yourself who it's just so clear that you're passionate about what you're doing. You have a heart for this, and you're certainly sharing your gifts with the world. So we really appreciate you sharing your gifts with the Mentor Select podcast. I have about 2 pages of notes, all of the things you told us. My daughter, she's 8 months, so I'm trying to get ahead of the game. Yeah, so I'm preparing to make sure I'll be whole sturdy and do that roller coaster.
You remember that? You remember that? I'm like, oh, this is a roller coaster moment that Monica was talking about.
Exactly. So, Monica, how can the listeners get in contact with you?
I'm really easy to find. You can hashtag Stress Lightly, and it will bring you to me. My website is www.stresslightly.com, and I'm on LinkedIn as Mindful Endeavors.
That's a really great name, and it's catchy. Stress Lightly. I like it a lot.
Thanks.
So looking forward to reading your book, and really can't thank you enough. But you'll be hearing from me more. Now I know you're such a wealth of information, resources. I certainly will.
Well, I've really enjoyed it. I thank you so much for having me on, Derek.
My pleasure.
You've been listening to Mentor Select. Mentor Select. Parenting teens to be successful adults. Hosted by Derek Phillips. Raising teenagers is hard. Understatement of the century. We get it. That's why Derek interviews leading experts that work with teens, educators, counselors, mentors, and authors to give you practical tips, strategies, and resources that you can incorporate immediately to better connect and understand your teen. That's why we do the show. Be sure to share Mentor Select with other parents of teens. Follow us on social media at Mentor Select to stay up to date on the latest tips, strategies, and resources for parenting teens. Send your questions and comments to derek@mentorselect.com. Tune in every Wednesday for new episodes. Till next time, this is Mentor Select.